Hi, this is Alex Rothermill again with a Hindsight Engine 6 claim bench testing video. Going to get into some of the charts and testing data that I have, but first, let's start with an appetizer. If you're ever wondering what the max rate of fire is for a Hindsight, let's see. And the minimum firing rate was 5 balls per second, 4.9, and the max was 21.1 balls per second. So that was at 10.5 dwell, and the highest was 299 FPS, and the lowest was 260 FPS. That is absolutely the fastest I've ever shot with eyes on, but I did break one. Anyway, so this is the product page for the Hindsight Engine. I pulled this early February, but it really hasn't changed as of March 14th, 2024. If you look at this product page, it makes about 6 concrete claims that the engine will do. And the basis of this review slash characterization testing is, does the engine do what this product page says it's going to do? So claim number one is that the engine is a lot stronger, everything's more concentric with each other, and just overall durability. So extremely durable and consistent design is claim number one. Claim number two is a very smooth shot, substantially slowed the bolt speed, increased smoothness, right? Claim number three, which appears to be totally opposite of claim number two, is not sacrificing on efficiency. Shorter shot retains efficiency. This is not a G-Tech. It's not a CS2 or CS3. It's not a 180R. The valve opening is tied to the bolt reciprocation. So because it is not a decoupled valve, or to remove the double negative, it is a coupled valve. The faster the bolt moves, the more efficient it works. The slower the bolt moves, the less efficient, more poofy whoosh the shot is. So it's either faster or it's slower, and there's no in between. The fourth claim is 10% lower operating pressure over previous engines, 5% more volume and a drop in operating pressure. This also yields a 10% drop in operating pressure, 15 feet per second faster. That is claim number four. Claim number five, this is a pretty strong claim, no bolt stick. Eliminate first shot drop off. Okay. And the sixth claim, kind of harder to see, but it does kind of call out and mean throughout the product page that they are saying this engine will be more consistent than the prior iterations of engines, being the NG stock engine and the reflex engine. So, how do we grade? How do we evaluate, right? Well, I want to start by saying that this only represents bench testing because the one time I did get a chance to take the gun out to play, it went down. The rear sail O-ring, rearmost on the tail, it's the U-cup. Whether it's the size of my stem or it's just a bad O-ring, between the two, air was blowing past that O-ring instead of sealing against it, and I wasn't getting the full air charge forward, and it had really bad stick, and it just went down, right? I diagnosed the issue, put in a regular O-ring. It's been working fine ever since. So before I get into the rubric, the total grades for each one, I want you folks to know that this didn't just come from what I thought was important. I created a poll on the Insight Victus Phase Facebook group, and I had 29 people respond saying that out of that 29, about 24 of them said that elimination of bolt stick is the most important thing that they're thinking about when buying a upgraded engine for the Insight, because as we know, if you've been paying attention to these videos, the Insight has a reputation for being lubricant sensitive, having really bad first shot drop off, and just generally not being a usable, reliable marker. The second, by a not very close margin, was slower bolt smoother, because paintball's kind of always had this thing where everyone wants the smoothest, quietest, poofiest, whoosh is most shot possible. And then I got a couple of votes for lower regulator pressure and faster bolt, more efficient. Some people want some more efficiency because they play on, 3,000 tanks that cool down to 2,500 out in the woods. And some folks, one person specifically told me, want to be softer on paint with a lower pressure. So I couldn't make the review 80% bolt stick or not, but I did make the review 50%, 50 points out of 100 bolt stick. Does it fix bolt stick or not? And then for slower bolt smoother, that's 15 points out of 100, because it is something that people care about quite a bit. It's definitely a lot of folks' number two consideration after bolt stick. And then regulator pressure and faster bolt, more efficient. Those are both at 10 points each. And then the last one, durable design, because of broken tines. I gave this one a few more points because I know a few people that have just had bricked, ruined Insights because their volume chambers have shattered or broken tines and become inoperable. And then rounding that out, the more consistent claim. They don't call it out that much, so it's not that many points. And the last part is if their secret sauce U cups are, in their product page, they talk about their U cups being not like others. If they work, that's extra credit. So let's get into extremely durable design, right? I was just talking about it, but the bolt volume chamber is significantly stronger because the Hindsight only has 1, 2, and 3 tines, whereas the old style has 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? There's more surface area, more leverage to kind of pull and break on the tines, and most importantly, as the bolt is cycling back and forth, it never actually hits this surface right here because it bumps against a bumper back here, and it really just saves a lot on the shock and wear and tear that this cage has to take. If you remember or you look at a manual, there's a bumper right here on the stock engine, and it's designed to take those hits, and we've just seen it. Mine and some other folks that eventually, or depending on whether or not you use a brass rim, these tines eventually break if you twist them or something happens. You can see a little break right there. This one actually has 3 broken tines. Um, a point against, though, and maybe you could argue that it should be more points against. During play, mine came unscrewed. So there's not a lot of friction interference connecting these two parts here. I put blue Loctite on there, and that's what resolved the issue for me. Um, I was able to use my hands and undo it. It takes a little more friction to undo it now, and that's where I want to keep it. There's no O-ring locking this. There's not a lot of threads connecting the two. The product page talks about a gap being there intentional. Um, it's minus a point because we have to do this. And then another thing that I did notice is um, this farther out shutoff is supposed to combat bolt tilt, and it does reduce bolt tilt, but you can still push it down and kind of make it ride sloppily in the breech. And this is how you get weird looking bolt wear, like on like one side of the bolt, and weird, strange breech wear. So there are things they could have done, extending this farther or increasing the surface that this ride. Well, now that would change the valve, but there are things they could have done to make this not have bolt tilt. It's still there. So overall, it's a much stronger engine. It's going to last a much longer amount of time, if not forever. So the grade for this one is 8 out of 10. -1, -1, 80%. So on to slower. smoother, and softer shot, right? There's a lot to unpack here, but this is going to be operating off of a central theory that you have inputs, you have your process, and you have your outputs, right? If you can run your gun at 7 dwell and it still cycles, when on the stock engine you had to run it at 10.5 or higher for it to shoot a ball at all, that means the bolt is cycling faster than stock. Pressure, volume, and solenoid microseconds is your inputs. The process is the bolt head crossing the valve, and your output is how much it shoots out the barrel. This is not necessarily a bad thing, right? For actually playing with a Hindsight engine, having no dwell effect above 10.5, it just being flat like this, that's reliability. That is performing just like a Field 1 force, right? But to make a product claim that you have a slower, smoother, softer shot, it doesn't make sense when the cycle completes 6% faster, right? The Hindsight will run at 7 dwell, and using the sci-fi board I monitor, it'll complete a cycle at an average of 25.18 ms, whereas the best I could ever do on a stock engine to complete a cycle was 10.5 dwell with 26.8 basically ms, microseconds. So it's 6% faster. And then when you actually weigh the bolts, the Hindsight bolt, because of having these wrench flats and this slightly longer, fatter tail, it's 5.2% heavier, right? So because the bolt is heavier and it moves faster, it cannot be smoother. So it is not smoother, it is not slower, it is not softer. This grade is 5 out of 15. This is a failing grade because the only way I could honestly be generous and give them 5 points on this is an engine that is consistently more recoil feels better than an engine that has less recoil but is inconsistent. Like some shots are shooting at 260, some shots are shooting at 220. That doesn't feel good. Whereas the Hindsight engine's pretty consistent at 280, 280, 280, 290, 280, 270, 280, 290. That feels better when it always feels the same and you can focus on your play. That's the only reason it got 5 out of 15, because this is classic paintball doublespeak. It's more efficient, but it's also smoother, and it's always reliable, but it's really quiet. Like you can only do 2 of those things at once. So 5 out of 15, failing grade for smoother, slower, softer shot. Now I just spent like 5 minutes talking about how it's actually faster, right? And because it's faster, I don't really need to spend as much time confirming that yes, it probably is more efficient. Yes, it is a shorter shot. The sci-fi eyes don't lie. The dwell tuning doesn't lie. It is a faster shot. It probably is more efficient, right? The Hindsight engine objectively cycles faster, and a faster opening valve is more efficient, all else being equal. Also, something to add here, right, for tuning for that max efficiency. At 150 psi, 170 psi, 180 psi, this is basically linear. It is predictable. When you have consistent predictability for your shot, you can have that crazy dwell tune to get the max amount of shots off of a tank as possible. Whereas with the stock engine, that's really tough to do because it kind of has this doesn't work at all and then sharply increases in performance until it's uh, dumping the entire chamber. However, right, where the Hindsight engine loses points on this is there's no manual for the Hindsight engine. There's no tuning guide for the Hindsight engine. You get a sticker talking about the pressure that you should set it at, and I guess they just assume that you're going to stick with the manual at 12, right? So the optimum efficiency tune based off of my testing is probably 8.5 dwell, and 180 psi to get you right here so that you're trapping air. But if you follow the manual and operate at 12 dwell, your bolt head is sitting forward for 2.5 microseconds, and you're dumping the chamber to zero when the last 40 or so psi don't add any feet per second to your paintball, right? And that's just lack of efficiency. That's just venting to atmosphere, right? So final grade for this is going to be a passing grade, 70%, 7 out of 10. So 10% lower operating pressure, right? Um, at the book specified dwell, it's not even close. You could say it's more than 10%, right? Because reflex engine at 12 dwell, it's putting out 265 FPS at 170 psi, and the stock engine without any taps, it's basically doesn't work to be honest, right? Which is why prior guidance has always said put it at 16 dwell so this stuff can work better, right? Now, the reason why this engine's not going to get a perfect score is for lower operating pressures. When you freshly lubricate a reflex engine and you put it to 16 dwell, it is essentially tied with a Hindsight engine, right? But the consistency is not there. This is worse, but the average is basically the same. It is within a couple percentage points, right? So overall, this engine does exactly what it says it does for operating a lower operating pressure. 9 out of 10, 90%, that's an A. So when we're talking about no bolt stick, this was the 80% of votes for the most important thing for the Insight. And doing cold weather testing at 12 dwell for 44 degrees Fahrenheit, letting the gun equalize for 2 hours, taking 5 shots, 1,000 bang, 1,000 bang, all passed above 270 feet per second. When I extended that out to 10 seconds, so 1,000, 1,000, all the way to 10, 5 passes, all above minimum, no bolt stick. I then took that out to 1 minute each with a timer just on my phone. And if it went longer, it went longer. All passed, right? I then set it to 10 minutes, only once, but that first shot, it was bang, above 280, even after sitting for 10 minutes, right? The stock engine could never do that. And finally, I threw the whole engine into the freezer, wrapped it with a paper towel with water, demonstrate that it was frozen. Took it out, ripped off the paper towel, shot it. First shot, 275 feet per second, even with a frozen bolt, even with water condensation. So from a bolt stick due to cold weather, full pass, all flying colors, good to go, right? The reason that the Hindsight engine consistently delivers a fully powered shot is because the forward air charge that occurs back here to propel the bolt forward, it stays propelling the bolt forward for about 0.1 of an inch more than the stock NG engine. Bob called this 3/16 of an inch. I measured it at 0.2 on the stock engine and 0.3 on the Hindsight engine. And I don't have a great way to measure this. I was kind of getting my calipers in there the best that I could, but it is significantly more on the Hindsight engine, right? But that brings us to the problem, the reason why my particular engine went down. This U-cup O-ring is a 012 class O-ring, and it is narrower than your typical U-cup O-ring that goes on the front of your valve in the volume chamber, which I believe is a 110 class U-cup. It's twice as wide. The flapper part of it that makes the U-cup has more room and more rubber to do flappy things, if that makes sense. So whether it was the O-ring failing or if it was because my ram tail was measuring at 0.3565 and I measured the same stock bolt at 0.360 and I measured the reflex tail at 0.360. Maybe my tail was small, maybe this U-cup O-ring was bad, But between the two, replacing with a standard 012 O-ring here resolved all my issues. And to me, the reliability penalty of running a U-cup here versus, well, the friction penalty is not worth, or the friction gain is not worth the reliability penalty that comes with using a U-cup here over a standard O-ring. I know at least one other person that this totally resolved all of his issues. He was lobbing paint like 10 feet forward, and then he changed it and he shot 4 pods in a row. Totally good. Some other folks that I talked to, this would probably solve their issue as well. Um, but to that point, if I have to change the O-ring in the back of the engine to get it working, it's not going to be a perfect score because I had to change the O-ring. This is something that perhaps testing or perhaps QC on the ram tail, I don't know which is which, maybe it's QC on the O-ring, should have caught. So um, all of that concluded, when this tail O-ring is right and it's interfacing correctly with the tail, there's no bolt stick for this engine anymore. It is fundamentally eliminated, and it is a very reliable system. So the final grade is 45 out of 50. I've touched on it on a few other slides. When it comes to being more consistent, that is what the Hindsight Engine has been on bench testing. You look at these charts, and pretty consistently it has the tightest spread, especially at 12 dwell. It's really not close. And the only engine that comes close to it at 16 dwell is a stock engine with taps in it, right? So the testing of other claims, we can go back on slides, but I'm not going to, confirms that the Hindsight Engine is consistently more consistent, a consistency of consistency, if you will, than either the reflex engine or the stock NG engine. However, your consistency over a chronograph is always going to be determined by paintballs, or the quality or lack thereof, honestly, in 2024. But a weak cycling bolt is going to tank whatever consistency you may have very quickly. So, final grade for this is the one section where it is a perfect score. It is nothing if not consistent. So, when you look at all of the grades in totality, durable design 80% B, a total whiff on slower, smoother, and softer. This is objectively not true. A passing grade for shorter shot and more efficient. An A grade for 10% lower operating pressure. A very good, got almost all the points for no bolt stick. If only that rear tail O-ring would have been right from the factory, this would have been a perfect score here. And then getting a perfect score on more consistent. The conclusion, the total is a C plus, 79 out of 100. The product does, for the most part, what it says it's going to do, with the exception of smoother, slower, and softer. Again, only represents bench testing, and I had that O-ring failure on the initial day of play, and that was scored here at the no bolt stick area. That's why the perfect grade was not here, and that's why extremely durable didn't get a perfect grade because of the needing to Loctite that particular engine. I'd really like to know if you folks think that this is a fair grade. I thought about it back and forth. I tried to take any emotion that I could out of it, and I definitely didn't want to fixate on price. You know, some of us, our time is worth a lot, and we just want to go and play and take out our Decorate old marker and have a good time with it. So really appreciate your time. Thanks for watching, and that is it for the Hindsight Engine 6 claims bench testing video.